he's taken the handbrake off when it comes to team a little bit. The iron symbol that he did before Arsenal went to West Ham. Is this all a pretty big indication, as we expect, that he's going to leave at the end of the season?
He was bigging up the FA Cup final so much during our chat last night as well, which I thought was quite interesting.
You go out as a double winner, and we know that the FA Cup is a competition he's always treated with respect and is close to his heart. So would it be a massive surprise if we get to Wembley on Saturday, they beat Chelsea, as most people expect, and then Pep Guardiola drops the bombshell that he's leaving at the end of the season, and that game next weekend against Aston Villa will be his Etihad swan song? I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Well, it's your responsibility to get that out of him on Saturday night, isn't it, when you speak to him after the FA Cup final? Well, it's only on days like this that we ask you to put your medals on the table. Scotty has got one. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, mate. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm just recovering, actually, because last night you'll know that I went to Manchester City versus Crystal Palace. It finished 3-0 to Manchester City. When the team news came out, there was a little bit of shock, I think. Would we agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. It felt like a gamble, but as Pep Guardiola said afterwards, when it comes off, you look like a genius. When it doesn't, everybody is willing to attack you. But fair play, those fringe players, Phil Foden in particular, Marmoush to a certain extent, who are trying to stake their claim for a place in the FA Cup final, got the job done.
Yeah, he made his point as he walked into the tunnel. So I'm in the tunnel down in the Etihad Stadium, and waiting for him to turn up. And all of a sudden, I'm talking to Josko Gvardiol, and he comes over. And if Pep comes over, you've got to just beam off what you're doing and just take Pep. So I was like, 2 questions to Josko in. I was like, sorry, mate, this is coming to an end really quickly. Off he went. And he came over and I said, Pep, congratulations on the victory, especially bearing in mind you made so many changes. And as I said that, he grabbed me by my shirt lapels and went, what did you say? What did you say when I named the team? What did you say? Did you say he's arrogant? Did you say he is arrogant? And I went, no, I didn't say that. I did say that it looked like you were keeping something in reserve. And he was like, oh, yeah, but they did okay, didn't they? They did okay. Savinho did okay. Very good. Yes. Antoine, very good. Yeah. And I was like, yeah. It's like one of those very odd moments. And I did think towards the end, how the relationship between me and Pep has changed over the course of 10 years. Whereas before I used to ask him questions, he didn't like them and he would just walk off halfway through. Now he's very playful with me and he does sort of like have a bit of a laugh and a joke. And he I don't know if he's sort of demob happy and he's coming to an end. And then that was his way of saying goodbye last night, but it was very, very funny.
Not many people, Sam, get a big bear hug and in the right way from Pep Guardiola.
I'm not going to say it was a bear hug. It didn't feel like that when he said to me, did you say I was arrogant?
No, I mean, look, it's always easier to be like that after a good performance. I've got to be honest with you. I mean, I did look at it and I thought, and as I'm watching it, Bernardo Silva and Phil Foden, there's the 2 holding midfielders. I'm thinking, actually, you got to look who you're playing against. And this is a Crystal Palace side that are just waiting for the Europa Conference League final. So to be honest with you, he still had the big guns on the bench if things weren't working out. And there's a massive game, of course, after the cup final against Bournemouth, which is going to be very, very tough. So he needs everybody absolutely fit and fresh for that. So I wasn't wholly surprised, even though it was a slight gamble.
Yeah, and 3-0 does very good things for the goal difference as well, because it means that although they jump above Arsenal in that regard, they also have scored a lot more goals than Arsenal. So if it comes down to goals scored, they'll win it on that.
Yeah, and that's why they went for the jugular to a certain extent last night. I do think Palace, even though I was quite surprised by the strength of their lineup, in fairness, but they played like a team with minds elsewhere. You compare that Palace performance to what Leeds did at Spurs on Monday. I know they started quite well, had that early chance when probably Mateta should have scored, but the offside flag was up anyway. But apart from that, it was just about as easy an opponent as you could hope to face at this time of the season, and it'll be more of the same for Arsenal should it get to the last day, which, as you know, I don't think it will get to the last day.
Yeah, because you think that Arsenal win against Burnley on Monday Night Live on talkSPORT, and then you will call the title on Tuesday when you go to Manchester City and their away trip at Bournemouth. You say the offside flag went up early on against Mateta I think it might be Munoz down that right-hand side who crossed the ball in as they put themselves 1-0 up, because the ball did go over the line in that first few minutes of the game and it had to be clawed back by Donnarumma, but the referee's watch went off. The offside flag never went up. That was like one of those things, like, so like weirded out by it. Blake Antrobus, who was the assistant on the far side, he never raised his flag. It was clearly offside, and we could see it was offside in real time. So we knew it wasn't going to count from the minute that the ball went towards the goal. But there was no indication from the assistant over on the far side. And it was only when Stuart Atwell looked at his watch, went like that, then turned round, looked over at the assistant, and then went offside, that he put his flag up. It was like, hello, wakey, wakey. I know it's early in the game, but can we get this right? I think he'd sort of assumed that VAR was going to call it out anyway once it had gone to the technology. Obviously, it would have gone to the technology because it just about went over the line. Phil Foden played really well, especially first half, Scott. But has he still got too much to do to sneak into that England squad, which is announced on May the 22nd at 11 a.m.?
Yeah, I think so. And, what a shame. We talk about talents, and it seems almost incredible that Phil Foden most probably won't go, and maybe even Cole Palmer might not go as well. And those two are special talents. But that ball, I mean, Pep Guardiola said after the game, I watched him. They sort of cut to him after that goal as if like, and he was moving his fingers in the way he does, as if like, yeah, we worked on that. I'm thinking, how do you work on that? And then obviously he admitted afterwards, you just don't. There are some players that just see what the picture before it happens. And if only Phil Foden could have played like that and sort of 10 games earlier and have a run of 10, 15 games in the way that he bossed that game, especially in the first half. And yeah, unfortunately for me, I think it's going to be too late.
Do you know what? That's really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm just thinking back on the conversation I had with him last night, and he was talking to me about shape and getting people organised and putting people in the right positions and making sure that there was a tactical plan. And then he said that what you do is you do all that work and you make sure that you've got everything organised, and then you give it to the good players. And he said, and Phil Foden just makes something happen. Ryan Cherky makes something happen. Antoine Semenyo makes something happen. And I wondered actually whether or not that was just a slight change in attitude from Pep Guardiola. Because if we go back even 5 years, maybe even 3, it looked like there was such a structure to every part of the team. Every attacking angle always had something prescribed about it. Whereas I do feel as if there is a little bit more freedom for those players to express themselves now. And he is allowing, those moments where, especially, you've got to indulge someone like Cherky to do what you want, haven't you? Because he's got such a talent. Look at that assist that he came up with for Savinho. I mean, crikey. I mean, as Lucy Ward said in commentary last night, if you are an opponent of him, you hate him. If he's not on your team, you hate Cherky because he's a show-off. He takes you on, he makes you look a bit of a mug, and then he comes up with something absolutely brilliant. If he's on your team, you're getting his name on the back of your shirt, aren't you? Because he's that sort of player, Crook.
Yeah, and it's funny you talked about, you've used the word relax there a few times. You know how Pep was with you in the interview, the fact he's taking the handbrake off when it comes to the team a little bit, the iron symbol that he did before Arsenal went to West Ham. Is this all a pretty big indication, as we expect, that he's going to leave at the end of the season? That this is the last we're going to see of Pep Guardiola at the Etihad. He's probably not going to go out in the ultimate blaze of glory by winning the title, but he could yet go out as a double winner. And we know that the FA Cup is a competition he's always treated with respect and he's close to his heart. So would it be a massive surprise if we get to Wembley on Saturday, they beat Chelsea, as most people expect, and then Pep Guardiola drops the bombshell that he's leaving at the end of the season, and that game next weekend against Aston Villa will be his Etihad swan song? I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Well, it's your responsibility to get that out of him on Saturday night, isn't it, when you speak to him after the FA Cup final? And interestingly, he was bigging up the FA Cup final so much during our chat last night as well, which I thought was quite interesting.
Biggest trophy out there, Sam. Biggest trophy out there.
Absolutely. Listen, whereas me and Crook will stand next to it on Saturday, alongside you on the touchline at Wembley, we will not be able to touch it. Whereas you can do what you want with it. You can go up and lick it if you want to, Scott, because you've won it.
I've got a very nice photo coming up. I'm going to put on my Instagram on the morning of the game of a few of us in the bath afterwards holding the cup.
Fully clothed or with bubbles, I hope?
No, but just bubbles. You don't go in a bath, not fully clothed.
By the way, just to let you know, Scott Minto's got a lot of fans, Crook, and he's obviously a very popular man, and we know that from when we're out and about and we bump into to punters who come up and say hello. He's got another fan. My little boy is a nightmare, Herbie. He never goes to sleep. He hates going to sleep. He wants to be part of the party. Scott knows. He's been out with him a few times. He's only 9, but he's been out with Scott. He thinks Scott's the best thing since sliced bread, right? The other night, when I think me and you were playing down at Tottenham, he said he couldn't sleep, so he had the radio on, and he was listening to a game. And he said, I said, "Oh, you were listening to a game, were you?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Scott Minto was on." And I said, "Did you listen to the game last night, Man City versus Crystal Palace?" He went, "No, Scott Minto wasn't on last night." Oh, dear. Arsenal versus Burnley is Monday night, and that will be Arsenal's chance to reply to what happened last night, but also set the agenda going into the final week of the season. Scott, I think we should just talk briefly about the scenario that we now find ourselves in. Do you think there's any chance that Arsenal could have nerves going into that game? Do you think Manchester City believe that they can still snatch it on the final day? Because ultimately, let's be clear, if nerves and anxiety do befall Arsenal against Crystal Palace on the last Sunday of the season, there's every chance that they can steal it still.
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest thing that City, they'll be kicking themselves for the rest of their lives if they drop points because they're not fully at it or they think they can't do it, and then Arsenal somehow drop points either against Burnley or Crystal Palace. I just feel, I think Arsenal have come through so much mentally this season that yes, of course they will be nervous. They know they're nearly there. It is literally, we talked about the marathon and they've come in and, a couple of games ago, they were level with a lap to go, but now they literally can touch the finishing line. And you've got Burnley at home, Palace away. We've just seen how Palace played and talked about them, and they're going to be days before their European Conference League final. I can't see how Arsenal can drop it from here. I just can't. Burnley look a better side, almost a little bit of the shackles have come off in a way under Michael Jackson, but it's not as if they're going to be any trouble in a way. This is about Arsenal against themselves. And if they can see through it, they've done the hard work. Now they've just got to finish it off. And look, the hardest game out of all the 4 matches remaining is Bournemouth away for City. It's not any of Arsenal's 2 games, so they should see it in from here.
Away at Palace on the final day of the season should be a tougher game than it looks because of the final situation. Palace have got 3 days between that and when they go to Leipzig, and they're not going to play their first 11. If they do play their first 11, it's going to be a situation like last night where he takes everybody off at halftime or just after halftime and prescribed changes, and everybody knows that the focus is elsewhere. So they should. And listen, if you had the chance to win your first title in 22 years and you had to beat Burnley and Crystal Palace to do it, I think you'd back yourself, wouldn't you? You would have thought so anyway. Lots of debate about whether or not this Arsenal side should fit into one of the greatest teams in the Premier League era if they win the Champions League too. Why on earth would you bother having that sort of conversation? Why? They haven't won anything yet. We haven't finished the season. They may well win the Champions League and the Premier League double, but there is no debate to be had. One, if they win this year, which I hope they do, at least the Premier League, they would have done very well to do so. But you can't talk about great sides and great teams until you have won multiple Premier Leagues. You don't become a great team by winning one Premier League title. We had this last year where people were where do Liverpool sit in a pantheon of champions? They're just champions. That's good enough, by the way. If you get to be a champion of the Premier League, you've done a very, very, very good job. The best teams that have played in this competition are Manchester United, probably the treble-winning team, and the circa 2008 team, which was absolutely fantastic. The Chelsea team under Jose Mourinho was absolutely superb, back-to-back titles. And the Manchester City team that won the treble. Right, they're the great teams of the Premier League era. You have to do a lot before you can even be spoken about in the same sentence as those 3. Am I right or am I right?
No, you are right, but obviously the debate for detractors of Arsenal is the style of play. So I think that's where this narrative comes from. Can they really be classed as a great team, or is this just quite an underwhelming Premier League season? I think it's really interesting when you look at the points tally, and it's going to be pretty low for champions. Manchester United are going to finish third, even though they had a clown in charge for the first half of the season. Aston Villa are going to qualify for the Champions League via the Premier League, even though they couldn't win a game in the first few weeks of the season. So there is an argument to say that a lot of the top teams actually are not as good as they were. But I think you counteract that by saying you look at the middle order of the Premier League and, teams like Bournemouth and Brighton and Brentford, Everton even, who ultimately are going to have a decisive say in this title race and maybe the relegation race as well. They're all capable of taking points off those top teams. So I think overall, the Premier League has been much more competitive this year. Leeds and Sunderland have played their part. But I think the teams at the top of the table are a pale imitation of previous incarnations. The Arsenal Invincibles, any number of Arsene Wenger's team. Actually, the team that won the first double, I think, is better than this Arsenal team. So I think it is a genuine debate. I think it is a worthwhile debate.
Manchester United won the title in 2001 with 80 points. The league sometimes does become quite congested. It happens like that, Scott, doesn't it? I mean, the fact that they'll probably win it with 85, it's not a mark against their name, I don't think.
No, but I agree with every single word that Crookie has said there. I think that the mid-table clubs have improved and they're really difficult to play against. But I think at the very top end, you only have to go far as back as, Pep City and Klopp's Liverpool in their prime just a few years ago when they're getting 90-odd points. I'm sorry, even these Bournemouths, Brentfords, Evertons, oh my goodness me, I'm seeing Chelsea in ninth, Fulhams and that they would have swished them aside, Klopp's Liverpool and Pep's City in their prime. So for me, the top end, I don't think it has been as good. I don't think it's been good maybe for a couple of seasons. I think that's why City's still rebuilding. Chelsea, we know, are going down a route that hopefully will change. Manchester United have been there for over a decade, out of the picture. And Aston Villa, well done for them for just getting into it. So I think top end, not high quality. I think Arsenal, I've always kind of backed them when people have wanted to criticise them, but they have been lucky with the draw in the Champions League. Well done to them for getting to the final. But they're not the second best team in Europe, in my opinion.
No, but also it's not really a debate, I don't think, to be had after 12 months of being a success. This is an Arsenal team that have been building towards becoming an established contender for top prizes. A couple of years ago, they couldn't even get in the Champions League. So the fact that they've slowly but surely incrementally built and now going to win the title, you don't automatically have a conversation about them being a great team. That happens when they've won 2, 3 Premier Leagues. I just don't get this sort of idea to try to slot them into a narrative of where they stand in the pantheon of great champions. It's almost like we've sort of run out of the debate of whether or not they've bottled it or not. So we can't talk about that anymore. So where do we stick them in the big list? The fact is, winning the Premier League is a brilliant achievement, especially in a tough season. I think it has been a tough season. If you speak to any of the managers, at any of the level of the Premier League, they will tell you that they think, especially that middle area, has got much more competitive and lots more people have taken points off people. Arne Slot told me the other day, the days of 90-plus points to win the league are over because the Premier League is so strong. So the fact is they've done a good job. Well done. Pat them on the back. Let's talk about greats in 2 years' time when they've won another Champions League or when they've won back-to-back Premier Leagues.
But Sam, that's the world we live in. The world we live in now are always looking for the extreme highs or the extreme lows. And I do think that...
Stay level.
Exactly.
Stay level, Scott. Stay level.
Stay chilled. But I do think there has been an agenda by some to try and criticise Arsenal whenever they possibly can. And as much as I've sort of said what I've said about Arsenal, you wouldn't put them in one of the top teams in Europe for me, even in the Premier League. But this still could be Arsenal's greatest ever season.
Yeah, and absolutely. And so they should celebrate it if it is. And good luck to them. And do you know what? I hope that they do it. Because I think they've had a lot of detractors. They've had to put up with a lot of noise. Mikel Arteta, I know Crook doesn't believe me, but he is a genuinely nice bloke. He's actually all right. And I think if he does it, again, I love this narrative of the fact that they gave him the keys to the castle and went, go on then, sort it out. And he has. So, I think that deserves a little bit of applause as well. Right, that's it for the Premier League title race. Let's get into the big game of the weekend. It is the FA Cup final at Wembley. Before we get into the game itself, a lot of stories swelling about Chelsea managers. Callum McFarlane could be the first Englishman since Harry Redknapp in 2008 to lift the FA Cup, only then to be replaced very quickly by somebody else. So who's it going to be, Crook? Because we all now believe it could be Xabi Alonso.
Yeah, we do. It's interesting. It shows how fluid a managerial hunt can be and how quickly a situation can change, because it was only about a week ago that I was told that Xabi Alonso wasn't completely convinced about this Chelsea project. But since Monday afternoon, when I got the nod that actually he's coming around to the idea, I think this one is accelerating. I think Xabi Alonso is the front runner, probably with Andoni Iraola in second place in that race, and that will have knock-on effects potentially for Crystal Palace's managerial search. But I think it's really interesting if Chelsea do go on and hire Xabi Alonso, because I think he's made certain demands during conversations. He wants a lot more control than the likes of Liam Rosenior certainly, and even Enzo Maresca had. Obviously, they're going for someone who's proven himself at Bayer Leverkusen and has managed at the very top level with Real Madrid. So that is a change in position. They're no longer going for sort of rookie managers who are learning on the job. And I think this would be an admission that a lot of the Blue Coast Sporting project has failed. If they completely tear up their recruitment process and go for someone ready-made. I think Liverpool fans are frustrated because they want Arne Slot replaced with Alonso. That's assuming that Xabi Alonso wants that job, which I'm not completely convinced would be the case.
It's difficult, this one, Scott, isn't it? Because the idea of Xabi Alonso going to Chelsea makes me very happy. It sort of suggests that Chelsea are going to do something a little bit differently. I mean, the only way it works, though, is if he is being given the job as the manager of the football club and given license to pick the players the way he wants to pick the players, and to, bring in a little bit more experience into the group, and they do change that philosophy. Now, I don't think, Crook says rip up the playbook and admit that the whole thing, the whole approach, the whole sporting approach by Bluco was wrong. I don't think that's the case. I think it's a tweak rather than a massive change. And the tweak is give more power to the manager and bring him some more experienced players. I think there still will be young players that are brought to the club, put on long contracts, and the idea will be to try and trade them further down the line. But just that sort of admission that maybe the manager needs a little bit more power, just that sort of change, that you need that more experience in the dressing room, will be refreshing. And actually, when they said after sacking Liam Rosenior, we're all going to sit in a dark room, meditate and do a bit of yoga together and have some self-reflection. If that's what's come out of that little sort of retreat, then I'm all for it, Scott.
Well, maybe we should go to a spa at some point and reflect on the season.
Scott, is this you, me, a trophy and some bubbles again? I mean, come on. You're being a bit transparent here, fella.
I was thinking about Crookie there, but if you want to chuck Crookie instead of Crookie, then fine.
Let me tell you, if we're all in a bath with Crookie, there's more than just a few bubbles.
And it won't be green tea that we're drinking either.
Let's quickly move on then, shall we? Look, I said earlier, I agree with every single word Alex Crook said. I disagree with him there, and I totally agree with you. I don't think it is look, it's an admission that they've got it wrong 100%, but in terms of the solution, it is a tweak. It is a tweak. And I did something on talkSPORT yesterday and, sort of asked the difference between Iraola and Xabi Alonso. For me, from the Chelsea hierarchy point of view, that is a mindset that they realise that the head coach needs to be a manager and not just a small cog in a wheel where the medical man sits on the bench and tells him when to take players off. If Xabi Alonso is offered and accepts the job, then that tells I have so much confidence going forward. Because I've said for all season, if not a couple of seasons, just 3 or 4 senior pros in the spinal positions who have been there, seen it, done it, with a manager who has been there, seen it, done it as well. And I don't read anything into what happened at Real Madrid. You only have to look at the infighting, literal infighting that's going on at Real Madrid to show what a basket case that club is there. But he still would have learnt a lot. And what he did at Leverkusen and the mentality he has, he wants the control. I think Chelsea will be back challenging within a year or so.
By the same token, though, and this is the final question I'll ask you on Xabi Alonso, Crook, there is an inherent risk here, isn't there? If Xabi Alonso doesn't judge this right and he isn't getting what he wants really, and they're just fobbing him off to get him through the door, and it all goes Pete on within the first 9 months, that will be a Chelsea job and a Real Madrid job that hasn't worked after Bayer Leverkusen. So it is a bit of a gamble for him, and he has to make sure that all those criteria are in place.
Yeah, he does. But I think it's a sign that he's backing himself. I agree with Scott. I don't think you can really judge him on Real Madrid. And actually, his win percentage wasn't that bad at the Bernabeu. You know, you would argue that Real Madrid have got worse since he left the football club, not better. And Jose Mourinho pitching up there now, which is going to be a fascinating experiment, is going to really have to is really going to have to tear up that dressing room, if you like, because there's so many big egos there. And actually, there are egos at Chelsea. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time criticising their players over the last few weeks, but they're different types of egos. They're not Kylian Mbappe size egos. So I think Xabi Alonso can manage that.
Kylian Mbappe is known for being quite a humble guy, actually, behind the scenes. He may well come across as if he's got a big ego to you, but apparently they used to call him Mini Obama because he was such a sort of diplomatic negotiator. The way he would deal with other people was always quite sort of very sort of friendly, and he always came across as quite a humble guy. But there are some others in there as well that are quite good at getting their own way. But no one has got a bigger ego than Jose. So good luck with that, lads. He's in charge now, and you're all in massive trouble. As for this, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm absolutely fully on board. As someone who quite likes Real Madrid, I'm pleased that Jose is there. He will go in and he will structure that team, and he will make sure that they are all in check.
We should mention, by the way, while we're talking about Jose Mourinho, there could be a sort of managerial domino effect because you've got Jose Mourinho, Marco Silva, and Felipe Luis all represented by the same agent.
Did they all get on the same jet, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, well, yeah, but certainly Silva and Mourinho did. So the suggestion is Mourinho to Real Madrid, Marco Silva, who's got a massive offer on the table from Fulham, but is still unsigned to Benfica, and then potentially Felipe Luis, who I reported exclusively is also on Crystal Palace's list, to replace Silva at Fulham. So one to keep an eye on.
Vamos Benfica.
Yes. Well, listen, you and Marco Silva can go and be mates. You look a little bit like Marco Silva a little bit, don't you two? Right. Okay. Back to this Saturday. Sorry. Chelsea players obviously now knowing that there's a possibility that Xabi Alonso comes in. Do you think that changes, Scott, the way that they approach it? Will there be a couple of them that are trying to sort of display to everybody that they should be part of his future plans?
I don't think one game changes that. I think Xabi Alonso is savvy enough to know that, as we saw in the semi-final where they lifted themselves, and I thought they played really well actually at Anfield. They'll play well here, whoever's in charge. So I don't think it is a question of, Xabi Alonso is watching, I better play well, because he would have done their homework on all of them, the character as well as the team. Now, we can turn around and say there's a lot of players out there with egos. I don't blame Enzo Fernandez or Marc Cucurella for saying what they said, because they are frustrated themselves with what's going on, because they want to be part of Chelsea. If they didn't care about Chelsea, they just keep quiet and let their agent do all the work. But they are showing that they care. Now, I know Crookie and has had a go at Enzo and a few others as well. And I get it. I do get it. But they are frustrated with what's happening. They've got 6-7 years left in their contract. They want to be challenging for the Premier League and the Champions League. And if anything, this season, they're falling away. So why would you not be frustrated about that? But Xabi Alonso comes in, trust me, it is a clean slate. And I would love it if Enzo Fernandez would stay there for Chelsea for next season.
What does it do to the dressing room when you hear that Xabi Alonso is going in? If you're a Chelsea player this week and you've noticed that all of a sudden that he's 5-2 on to become the new manager of Chelsea, which is pretty much nailed on now, right? That's the feeling. Okay, let's say it's 80% that he becomes the manager of Chelsea. Does your mindset change immediately? Do you think, hold on a second, there's every chance we can start competing now. They're taking this seriously. Does that figurehead and the level of that figurehead give you a different outlook onto the way the club is going?
Absolutely. 100%. Because, we're seeing the way they're going at the moment, and it's not in the right direction. It's not even sort of challenging at the moment. They might not even finish in in a European place. That's just Chelsea Football Club we're talking about, club world champions. So they've got to be challenging regularly. And those players who seem really unhappy with what's happened over the last 12 months, who were really close to Enzo Maresca. And look, I feel sorry for Liam. He'll come back and he'll get another good job. And I think he'll show to be a really good manager. But this is Chelsea Football Club. And these players now want to be winning those major trophies. And if Xavi Alonso comes in place, it's like, bang, there's a flag in the floor. We're going to go again. And fair play to the owners if they do that.
I think it sort of reminds me a little bit of when you were at Chelsea and Glenn Hoddle is the manager or comes in to be the manager. And as soon as Glenn Hoddle comes in to be the manager, everyone goes, wow, Ken Bates is taking this seriously, this rebuild seriously of the football club. Then when Glenn becomes the England manager, they bring in Ruud Gullit and you're like, okay, all right, we really are going for it now. Do you know what I mean? And then when Ruud goes, it's Gianluca Vialli. So you've got like, I suppose that sort of charisma and those characters that turn up, they elevate the feeling around the football club. And Xabi Alonso has the ability to do that for Chelsea. I just hope that he's given the tools to be able to do it as well.
He will,
because
Sam.
It could
He
be
will.
a recipe for success.
He will, or he walk out. He will, or he walk out. There's no point in promising Xabi Alonso what he wants and then not giving it to him, because he is one of those who will walk out.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at the rest of the action now. The race for Europe is suddenly the big area of jeopardy heading in to the end of the season. Crook is very excited about this because everybody that he follows on the South Coast could be playing European football. In fact, all the stories are on the South Coast at the moment. The investigation into Spygate 2.0 is rumbling on. Tonda Eckert is going to stay at least for one question at a press conference before he gets up and walks out ahead of the championship final, maybe. The three Bs, often maligned by Premier League nostalgiarists, are battling it out for Europe. Brentford, who haven't been in great form in terms of results, but actually have played a little bit better with the eye test than the results suggest recently. Brighton, who I think probably are favourites to claim sixth place. I think so when you look at the fixtures. And Bournemouth as well. Which are the best place for European campaign, Crook?
Well, bearing in mind, I've been telling anyone who listened that Bournemouth will take something off Manchester City next week. I've got to make them favourites. Forest away on the last day. Forest already safe, I think, is very winnable. Brighton are in brilliant form as well, bearing in mind they were 1 win in 13 mid-season. Fans were calling for Fabian Hurtzler's head. They've really got the wind in their sails, but they've got a tough game this weekend against Leeds. I was really impressed with Leeds' attitude and their professionalism, their desire against Tottenham. It's their last home game of the season, so I think a point would be a good result for Brighton. I do think Brighton will beat Manchester United at home on the last day if they need to secure some form of European football. I'm at Brentford on Sunday. Keith Andrews has done a magnificent job. We've been waxing lyrical about him most of the season, but they do seem to have just stuttered in recent weeks. They're not losing many games. They're not winning many either. So I think it is going to be out of Bournemouth and Brighton. And I'm just going to come down on the side of Bournemouth to finish sixth.
Okay, so what happens when they get to Europe, Scott? Because if you look at all three of these sides, they've got a reputation of being selling clubs. How do they keep their talent that's got them to these big European competitions, should they get there? And I think maybe all three will end up playing in Europe, actually, in some various guise. But if that happens, how do Brentford keep hold of Thiago? How do Brighton keep their squad together? John-Paul Van Hecke has got a lot of admirers. Balib's got a lot of admirers. Jack Hinchelwood has got a lot of admirers as well. You know, how do Bournemouth manage their squad cost ratio issue and keep hold of Eli Junior Krupi and Ryan, who have come in and ripped it up? Because they've got a reputation of being a stepping stone club.
Yeah, and look, I think it does depend on the Bournemouth-Man City game as to who finishes in that sixth place, because I think Bournemouth will probably get a point against Forest. But I'm going for City to win all their matches. So I think Brighton will just nick it and in that sixth spot. And I think they are the standout team out of three that is able to cope with League and Europe next season. I think what Keith has done at Brentford is nothing short of sensational. You know, I said at the start of the season, if he finishes 17th, he should be up there for manager of the season. So what he's done is brilliant with the change of backroom staff, the way he's improved players. He's brought players in. They've fitted in perfectly. They look fitter than ever before. I think Bournemouth, Crookie said it on several occasions, the new money rules are going to be very, very difficult for them. So not only will they struggle to bring in the type, I think I'm right in saying that the stadium will go down to 8,000 for a period of time, when it's 11,000 at the moment. They are completely punching, whereas Brighton are just on that upwards trajectory, aren't they? With a young manager who have just signed a new contract, they've given belief to. So for me, I think Brighton will finish 6th. I think Bournemouth and Brentford will struggle next season in Europe, but understandably so. I think Brighton are the team that are able to handle it. We'll have to wait and see whether that is going to be in the Champions League or the Europa League.
Let's talk about the other big European fixture, Aston Villa versus Liverpool, live on talkSPORT on Friday night. Who is going to finish 4th and who is going to finish 5th? Woohoo! But actually, it is really important, because if Aston Villa finish 5th and win the Europa League, then 6, as we've been talking about, gets a place in the Champions League. If they were finished in the top 4, that doesn't happen. So I think most of the league is willing on Liverpool to win this fixture, especially all the other teams that could finish in 6th. I'm not sure the Aston Villa fans feel that way, but I think that certainly everybody else is, because we want 6 teams in the Champions League next season. Look, I suppose with Aston Villa, the other issue that you've got with them is that they've got to make sure they're in rhythm going into this final. But this final is coming around a lot quicker than the others. This one takes place next Wednesday night. Does that benefit them in their league position? Because I suppose in a way they've got to keep themselves honest and on the bridle.
Yeah, but they haven't really done that, have they? I think it's 8 points from their last 9 league games. And again, this sort of emphasises what I was saying about the strength of the top end of the league. They started the season appallingly. They're not ending it particularly well, but they're still going to finish in the top 5, Aston Villa. I'm really intrigued to see what team he sends out, because obviously they've got the European final sandwiched in between these 2 final games of the season. I think for Liverpool, you were there, Sam, the reaction to Arne Slot, and particularly taking off young Engamoa, tells you how fractured his relationship with the supporters is at this moment in time. The hierarchy are holding firm, hence the fact that they're not making a play for Xabi Alonso, which is what all the fans want them to do. But it's important, I think, for Slot that he finishes this season well, and certainly that he goes into next season on a high and starts that one well as well. And then you've got this fascinating situation that we've not really spoken about too much. Liverpool against Brentford, last day of the season. Brentford, if they're in 6th place by then, might be in a position where they want to lose the game so that Liverpool finish 4th, Aston Villa finish 5th, and therefore 6th becomes a Champions League place, which is almost unheard of. The only time I can really think of a group of fans wanting to lose on the final day of the season.
Oh, I remember it.
Was Liverpool against Blackburn. And obviously Liverpool won, and Andy Cole blew the title for Manchester United, but we don't talk about that because he gets the ump.
But you're
Hold
right.
on. The last time it happened actually was at the Hawthorns, West Bromwich Albion against
we remember that one as
Portsmouth.
well, yeah.
If West Brom beat Portsmouth, then Southampton would be relegated. So the Portsmouth fans spent the whole game cheering on West Brom. And when they scored, they cheered their goal as well. And when they did beat them, they all invaded the pitch. The whole ground invaded the pitch, met in the middle and celebrated together.
Yeah.
That was the end of a Premier League season, I think 2004 or 2005.
2005.
Brilliant. Fantastic end to the season.
Quick question. Sorry, just a quick question to Crookie. You said earlier in the pod, with a little bit of a smile as well, that Xabi Alonso want the Liverpool job? Why would he not want the Liverpool job?
I think he likes the idea of managing in London and living in London.
Okay.
I think the difference is that obviously he used to live in Liverpool. He was there for a long time. I think that he's got a desire to sort of experience something new, and the idea of being in London sort of definitely appeals to him. But he's only going to take that job if it's on the right terms. I think the Liverpool job will always be there for him. I think it will be difficult if he takes the Chelsea job to go to Liverpool. But listen, I think really with Xabi Alonso, I don't think he's going to be a manager for the rest of his life. I think the other thing about Xabi is that he's quite happy to do it and be a part of it, but I'm not necessarily sure that it's going to be a vocation until he's 70. Do you know what I mean? I think he sees it as sort of something he's going to do for the next 15 years, and that's it. hang up his boots very early. Let's talk a little bit about Arne Slot, though, because obviously you mentioned there that the fans want Alonso. How do you repair the damage that seems to have been done to the relationship between Slot and the fans, Scott? Really, I know that Arne Slot thinks he can turn it around, but do you think that's possible next season?
Yeah, I think it's possible. How do you turn it around? You win football matches. So how do you win football matches? Well, you get the recruitment right. It's all about the players and obviously the manager as well, but it's about the players, and they've got it horribly wrong for whatever reason this year. And I do think that Arne Slot can turn around and say, well, look, judge me over the 2 years, i.e. throw in the Premier League title. If it had been reversed these 2 years, then people would have understood. We've talked about the reasons why, both on and off the pitch, that perhaps it hasn't worked. The question for the hierarchy is, and I've said this before, they've got to look at him in the whites of his eyes and say, what's the problem? Do you know how to sort it? How much is it going to cost? And if he looks like, and to be fair, his last interview that I listened to anyway, it looks like he knows what he wants to do. I personally think he deserves a summer and another year. But I've not seen Liverpool fans ever quite get like this on their manager ever before.
Roy Hodgson?
Yeah, actually, yeah, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. Roy Hodgson's an excellent manager, never quite a fit at Liverpool.
No, and that was an odd situation as well, because I remember actually he was working quite intensively on the court case. I was in the High Court every day with Liverpool and their owners and Martin Broughton and that group that eventually got them sold to FSG. So that was a very odd period of time, actually. So I think that probably you have to sort of take that in isolation. But you're right, if this is not something that happens at Liverpool very often. And Crook's already mentioned the Ngamoa situation and how that exploded on Saturday lunchtime. But the truth is that Slot thought that Ngamoa was injured. In fact, Ngamoa had told him he was injured and needed to come off. But that can't be communicated at that point. It's not like you can do the VAR thing and say open mic and say, I'm taking off number 73 because he's got serious cramp. So don't boo the decision, please, lads. But anyway, I think he's got a lot of work to do. Unai Emery has been touted as a possible replacement for Xabi Alonso at Real Madrid. Obviously, we now know that that's not going to happen. He's been touted as a possible replacement for Ruben Amorim in the long term at Manchester United. We don't think that's going to happen either, because Michael Carrick is on the verge now of signing a 3-year contract as the manager of Manchester United. So what happens next with Unai Emery? Is he going to, as we advocated for him to do, build a dynasty at Aston Villa going forward, Alex Crook?
Yeah, I think now those 2 jobs are off the table. I've not heard of any other interest. So you would imagine that he will stay, particularly having guided Villa back into the Champions League, maybe, probably to their first trophy in 3 decades. They're heavy favourites to win that Europa League final. And then it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the summer. Do they then have the ability to keep hold of Morgan Rogers, who's got a lot of suitors elsewhere? Do they have the ability to give Unai Emery the funds to really go and build a team that can challenge at the top end of the table? Because we've spoken about it already. Chelsea have fallen off a cliff. I think Tottenham, if they stay up, will be much better under Roberto De Zerbi next season. You would imagine Manchester United are going to invest heavily this summer and kick on again. Liverpool should be better with a full pre-season behind them and more reinforcements. So with the current squad, without making significant signings, I think it'd be difficult for Aston Villa to replicate next season what they've achieved this.
Just on Aston Villa, I think that they're right to be major favourites. In fact, I'm going to rank the European finals in terms of probability of an English win. Number 1, Europa League, Aston Villa against Freiburg. Having done Freiburg a couple of times this season, good team, some good players. I like Manzambi. He's a very good player and a young player, and I think he'll end up playing for a big club in Europe somewhere further down the line. But they don't look to me like they have got goals at the top level. They'll score goals, and they've scored quite a lot of goals in the German league, but I'm not sure they'll score too often against Aston Villa, and I think Aston Villa have got the firepower to overcome them. Crystal Palace, number 2, and their game against Rayo Vallecano. High press, they'll put you under the pump, Vallecano. You've got to find a way out. If you get out the other side, there's going to be spaces and maybe there's opportunities to play, but you've got to be ruthless in front of goal when you take on a team like that. And that is one thing that Crystal Palace haven't been over the course of the season. but I still think they're second most likely to win a European trophy. And then, of course, the toughest one is the Arsenal one. They take on the champions of France. Congratulations to PSG, by the way. They've won their title, so they can put their feet up for a couple of weeks and prepare for the Champions League final. Would you agree with that, Scott?
Yeah, 100%. 3-2-1, total agreement. Just looking at Villa's fixtures as well. Don't forget, it's not as if they've got one more game left. That's Manchester City away, who might be needing to win that game, to win the title. We don't know. So this is really the last game where I think they'll have a chance of picking up any points, but I don't see how. So I basically am saying they will finish fifth, and I agree with you that they will win the Europa League as well. So I'm sure the rest of the teams just below would be hoping for the same thing.
Yeah, perfect scenario if you're Brighton or Bournemouth, that's for sure. Let's round things off now by looking at the bottom of the table. And West Ham, will they finally catch a break after a really rough few weeks? Well, they already caught one, didn't they, West Ham? They caught a bit of a break on Monday night because Leeds United really had nothing to play for. They were already safe. We turned up at that game on Monday night expecting a cup final atmosphere and Spurs to roll over and get 3 points and go 4 points clear of relegation. The atmosphere was never like that. It was far too tense. It was far too sedate. It didn't feel like a major game to get yourself safe. I go back to the Everton matches under Frank Lampard where they needed to win almost like cup finals at the end at Goodison Park, and they got over the line mainly because of the atmosphere more than anything else. It was not like that. It was not like that at all. And Spurs actually could have quite well have been beaten on Monday night by a very good Leeds side. I spoke to Daniel Farker about it. I said, I was surprised that your team played so well. And he said, every game is a big game if you play for Leeds United. And I was like, fair enough. I like that mentality. It's great. But it means that, Scott, if your old team beat Newcastle, Spurs are in the relegation zone before they go to Chelsea.
Yeah, and I think after all what happened last week at West Ham, I think pretty much everybody connected at West Ham was thinking, that's it, it's done. Spurs are going to beat Leeds. And then Matthias Tell scores a blinder. And then it's exactly why you don't want wingers in your box. They don't know how to tackle. And instead of heading the ball, he tries to do an overhead kick in the box. What are you thinking of? So suddenly, absolutely, the West Ham are back in the game. Everyone's saying about how badly Newcastle are playing and the bad season they've had. It's like a proud nation up there with the Geordies. This is their last home game of the season. Let me tell you, this is going to be as difficult to play them as if it was the first game of the season, because they will want to try and finish on as much of a high as possible. Honestly, I'd take a point right now. I really would, and hopefully take it to the last game where, again, a very good Leeds side, as Crookie was saying, surely West Ham, if they need to win and need to beat Leeds at home and they're safe, they can get the job done there. I'd take a point right now at St James's Park.
If you are Nuno Espirito Santo, do you just bite the bullet, even though you haven't been that fond of him for whatever reason, and just play Callum Wilson?
Yeah, I think you do. And actually, I'd play him up front alongside Castellanos, go for the jugular. I agree with what Scott is saying. It's been a dismal season for Newcastle, really, domestically. They could finish as low as 16th, which, bearing in mind, they would have harboured serious European aspirations, tells you how disappointing it's been. There's a lot of negativity from their fans around Eddie Howe at this moment in time. And I think West Ham need to cash in on that negativity, take the game. They play as well as they did for the last hour against Arsenal. I think they've got a tremendous opportunity, and we'll drop it in there. You and I played at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Monday. We spent a bit of time with Spurs legends. I had a shot. It went wide. But we spent a bit of time with some Spurs legends, and they were saying to me they are really nervous about this game. In fact, one of them said to me, if Newcastle lose at home to West Ham, we're going down. So that's how big they think this game is. And again, it's that scoreboard pressure, isn't it? With West Ham playing a few days ahead of Tottenham, go to Chelsea. Maybe the FA Cup final result might have an outcome on Chelsea's performance, but the fans are going to be up for it. The players know what that rivalry means. So there's every chance that Chelsea beat Spurs. And if West Ham do win at Newcastle, then destiny would therefore be in their own hands ahead of what Scott says looks a winnable game at home to Leeds. I think this is probably the most important game in the relegation battle between now and the
I
end of the season.
totally agree, because it is that psychological pressure that West Ham will put on Tottenham by forcing them back into the relegation zone if they win.
Yeah.
Now, it's a remarkable turn of events that, we're in the dying embers of the season. And if they were to win this game, West Ham, they'd get 39 points, which would mean that there's every chance that Tottenham Hotspur would have to get 43 points to stay in the league, which is absolutely ridiculous, just to guarantee that they stayed in the league, which is ridiculous. And it shows, again, I think a little bit like the top end of the table, just how congested that middle part of the Premier League really is and how strong those teams in the middle really are. I said that on Monday night there wasn't a cup final atmosphere at Tottenham. Let me tell you now, if Tottenham are in the relegation zone on Tuesday night and they go to Stamford Bridge, the atmosphere is going to be like a bear pit. It's going to be absolutely intoxicating, because Chelsea have been nothing short of rubbish for most of the second half of the season, right? But they will demand that team turns up for that fixture, Scott.
And it will remind me of the atmosphere that was created where Spurs were going for the title.
2016.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Battle of the Bridge. How many yellow
cards
cards are we going to have this time?
Well, 2-0 down. I just hope that the Chelsea players, I'm sure they will, understand what the game, whether they win the cup or not, will understand what this game against Spurs and the opportunity they have in putting them down means to the fans. So, yeah, fascinating. And look, I said I'd take a point now. It's just because everyone's saying Newcastle are so poor, and the 3 points I think it probably would send Spurs down. I think psychologically, the blows that they've had, that they've not handled them very well. The back-to-back victories against, one, the worst team in the division, and two, a team that made 7 changes and looked as if they'd never played together. So massive, massive game. I'd take a point, but I do hope it's all 3. And if Spurs go into that game at Stamford Bridge on Tuesday night in the relegation zone, if you're a Spurs fan, be very worried.
Well, I'd be worried for this reason. They don't look like they can cope in their own stadium. So coping in a bear pit atmosphere, I don't think is going to be in their wheelhouse, Crook.
No, and I think that's the most disappointing thing if you're Roberto De Zerbi, because what does Roberto De Zerbi bring? Fire and brimstone. And, I think the players have brought a little bit of that. I think actually putting Conor Gallagher back in the team has been a really clever move from De Zerbi, because he is that type of character. Richarlison to a lesser extent, although I thought he was absolutely useless on Monday night. I wasn't impressed with the Tottenham attackers at all. But, yeah, the anxiety of the fans is a problem. And in some ways, maybe it might help playing away from home against Chelsea. Maybe that might just bring the best out of De Zerbi and his players. But there's going to be massive anxiety come the final day of the season, because this is a group of fans who have become accustomed to their team not winning games at home. And I think that's a major problem that Roberto De Zerbi hasn't yet solved, because having gone 1-0 up against a team with nothing to play for, they really should have gone on and won that match on Monday night. But
absolutely,
they look petrified at the end. And that save from Kinski, by the way, that could be a £120 million save.
Absolutely.
Wonderful the way he tipped it onto the bar.
It could just have kept them in the Premier League, but he also might not still have done enough to do so. West Ham going to the weekend 36 from 36, Tottenham 38 from 36. And obviously, if we're assuming here, or we've talked a lot about the possibility of West Ham winning at Newcastle. If they don't, then obviously the scoreboard pressure works the other way. Yeah. And all of a sudden, Tottenham have got to go to Chelsea, get something. If they were to lose, actually, West Ham, Tottenham have only got to go to Chelsea, get a point.
But that's
and they're
the other reason
safe.
That's the other reason why it was so lamentable not to beat Leeds. West Ham opened the door. That VAR call opened the door, and Tottenham couldn't walk through it.
Well, it'll be interesting to see who falls through the trapdoor, because that is probably going to go down to the last day of the season. And, of course, everything will be covered on talkSPORT, as is this weekend's football, because we've got Aston Villa against Liverpool Friday night. Saturday, the FA Cup final from 1 o'clock. We will be there. Me, Crookie, Stuart Pearce, Adrian Durham, and the 1997 FA Cup winner. In fact, out of that group, how many of us have played at Wembley, and how many of us have got a medal?
Well, don't tell Stuart Pearce.
So Stuart Pearce
Don't
hasn't won
remind
an
him of
FA
his
Cup, but he has
Cup.
played at
Right.
Wembley. He
Oh, yeah.
scored an FA Cup final, to be fair.
goal.
I've played at Wembley, and Scott has won the FA Cup and played at Wembley. So, just saying. Manchester United against Nottingham Forest. Michael Carrick auditioned for the permanent job, his final audition for it before he gets it, I think. And Bruno Fernandes trying to get 20 assists. That's live on talkSPORT at 12:30. Yeah, that's the narrative for that game, folks. Going round the grounds with Adrian at 2:30 on what is a Saturday on a Sunday. And then on Monday night, I'll be live at Arsenal versus Burnley as they look to inch a little step closer towards lifting their first title in 22 years. Make sure you join us.